Hello and welcome to Ms. PM Reads Christian Content, where we are continuing in All's for the Best by T.S. Arthur. And in our last video, we didn't finish the chapter completely. We met Mrs. Wychoff and Mrs. Lowe, and they were discussing Mrs. Wychoff's seamstress and how Mrs. Lowe was going to have her working for her the following week. Mrs. Wychoff also noticed that the seamstress was not seeming to be feeling well or doing well. So she made sure she had some food, breakfast and lunch, and that's where we stopped. At the usual hour, Mary Carson appeared the next morning. Living at some distance from Mrs. Wychoff's, she did not come until after breakfast, so that's the seamstress. The excellent lady had thought over the incident of the day before and was satisfied that, from lack of nutritious food at the right time, Mary's vital forces were steadily wasting, and that she would, in a very little while, destroy herself. "I will talk with her seriously about this matter," she said. "A word of admonition may save her." "You look a great deal better this morning," she remarked as she entered the room where Mary was sewing. "I haven't felt better for a long time," was the cheerful answer. "Did you sleep well last night?" "Very well." "Any cough?" "Not of any consequence, ma'am." "How is the pain in your side?" "It troubled me a little when I first went to bed, but soon passed off." "Did you feel the old exhaustion on waking?" "I always feel weak in the morning, but it was nothing this morning. It to what it has been." Okay, there we go. "How is your appetite?" "Better. I ate an egg and a piece of toast, and they tasted good. Usually my stomach loathes food in the morning." "Has this been the case long?" "For a long time, ma'am." Mrs. Wychoff mused for a little while and then asked, "How do you account for the difference this morning?" Miss Carson's pale face became slightly flushed, and her eyes fell away from the questioning gaze of Mrs. Wychoff. "There is a cause for it, and it is of importance that you should know the cause. Has it been suggested to your mind?" "Yes, ma'am. To me, the cause is quite apparent." They looked at each other for a few moments in silence. "My interest in you prompts these questions, Mary," said Mrs. Wychoff. "Speak to me freely, if you will, as to a friend. What made the difference?" "I think the difference is mainly due to your kindness yesterday, to the glass of wine and biscuit when I was faint, and to the early and good dinner when exhausted nature was crying for food. I believe, Mrs. Wychoff," and Mary's eyes glistened, "that if you had not thought of me when you did, I should not be here today." "Are you serious, Mary?" "I am indeed, ma'am. I should have gotten over my faint spell this morning, or in the morning, even without the wine and biscuits, and worked on until dinner time, but I wouldn't have been able to eat anything. It almost always happens when I go so long without food that my appetite fails altogether, and by the time night comes, I sink down in an exhausted state from which nature finds it really hard to rally. It has been so a number of times. The week before I came here, I was sewing for a lady and worked from 8 o'clock in the morning until 4 in the afternoon without food passing my lips. As I had been unable to eat anything at breakfast time, I grew very faint, and when called to dinner, was unable to swallow a mouthful. When I got home in the evening, I was feverish and exhausted, and coughed nearly all night. It was 3 or 4 days before I was well enough to go out again." "Has this happened in any instance while you were sewing for me?" asked Mrs. Wychoff. Miss Carson dropped her face and turned it partly aside. Her manner was slightly disturbed. "Don't hesitate about answering my question, Mary. If it has happened, say so. I am not always as thoughtful as I should be." "It happened once." "When?" "Last week." "Oh, I remember that you were not able to come for 2 days. Now tell me, Mary, without reservation, exactly how it was. I never blamed you for a moment, Mrs. Wychoff. You didn't think, and I'd rather not say anything about it. If I been as well as usual on that day, it wouldn't have happened. You'd passed a sleepless night, said Miss Wychoff. Yes, ma'am. The consequence of fatigue and exhaustion? Perhaps that was the reason, and couldn't eat any breakfast. I drank a cup of coffee. Very well. After that, you came here to work. Now tell me exactly what occurred and how you felt all day. Don't keep anything on account of my feelings. I want the exact truth. It will be of no use to me and to others also, I think. It will be of use, not no use. Thus urged, Miss Carson replied, I'll tell you just as it was. I came later than usual. The walk is long, and I felt so weak I couldn't hurry. I thought you looked a little serious when I came in and concluded that it was in consequence of my being late. The air and walk gave me an appetite, and if I had taken some food then, it would have done me good. I thought as I stood at the door, waiting to be let in, that I would ask for a cracker or a piece of bread and butter, but when I met you and saw how sober you looked, my heart failed me. Why, Mary, said Mrs. Wychoff, how wrong it was in you. Maybe it was, ma'am, but I couldn't help it. I'm foolish sometimes, and it's hard for us to be anything else than what we are, as my Aunt Hannah used to say. Well, I sat down to my work with the dull pain in my side and the sick feeling that always comes at such times, and worked on hour after hour. You looked in once or twice during the morning to see how I was getting on and to ask about the trimming for a dress I was making. Then you went out shopping and did not get home until 2:30. For 2 hours there had been a gnawing at my stomach, and I was faint for something to eat. Twice I got up to ring the bell and ask for a lunch, but I felt backwards about taking the liberty. When at 3:00 I was called to dinner, no appetite remained. I put food into my mouth, but it had no sweetness, and the little I forced myself to swallow lay undigested. You were very much occupied and did not notice me particularly. I dragged on as best I could through the afternoon, feeling sometimes as if I would drop from my chair. You had tea later than usual. It was nearly 7:00 when I put up my work and went down. You said something in a kind but absent tone about my looking pale and asked if I would have a second cup of tea. I believe I forced myself to eat a slice of bread half as large as my hand. I thought I should never reach home that night for the weakness that came upon me. I got to bed as soon as possible, but was too tired to sleep until after 12:00, when a coughing spell seized me, which brought on the pain in my side. It was nearly daylight when I dropped off, and then I slept so heavily for 2 hours that I was all wet with perspiration when I awoke. On trying to rise, my head swam so that I had to lie down again, and it was late in the day before I could even sit up in bed. Towards evening, I was able to drink a cup of tea and eat a small piece of toast, and then I felt wonderfully better. I slept well that night and was still better in the morning, but did not think it safe to venture out upon a day's work. So I rested and got all the strength I could. On the third day, I was as well as ever again. Mrs. Wychoff drew a long sigh as Miss Carson stopped speaking and bent down over her sewing. For some time she remained without speaking. Life is too precious a thing to be wasted in this way, said the lady at length, speaking partly to herself and partly to the seamstress. We are too thoughtless, I must own, but you are not blameless. It is scarcely possible for us to understand just how the case stands with one in your position, and duty to yourself demands that you should make it known. There is not one lady in 10, I am sure, who would not be pleased rather than annoyed to have you do so. Mary Carson did not answer. Do you doubt? Said Mrs. Wychoff. For one of my disposition, was replied, the life of a seamstress does not take off the keen edge of natural reserve, or, to speak more correctly, sensitive. I dislike to break in upon another's household arrangements, or in any way to obtrude myself. My rule is to adapt myself as best I can to the family order, and so not disturb anything by my presence. Even though your life may be in jeopardy, said Mrs. Wychoff. Oh, it's not so bad as that. But it is, Mary. Let me ask you a few more questions. I'm growing more interested in the subject as reaching beyond you personally. How many families do you work for? After thinking for a little while and naming quite a number of ladies, she replied, not less than 20. And to many of these, you go for only a day or two at a time? Yes. Passing from family to family and adapting yourself to their various home arrangements? Yes, ma'am. Getting your dinner at 1 o'clock today and 3 or 4 tomorrow? Miss Carson nodded assent. Taking it now, warm and well served with the family, and on the next occasion, cold and tasteless by yourself after the family has dined? Another assenting inclination of the head. One day set to work in an orderly, well-ventilated room, and on the next, cooped up with children in a small apartment, the air of which is little less than poison to your weak lungs. These differences must always occur, Mrs. Wychoff, replied Miss Carson in a quiet, uncomplaining voice. How could it be otherwise? No housekeeper is going to alter her family arrangements for the accommodation of a sewing girl. The seamstress must adapt herself to them and do it as gracefully as possible, even at the risk of her life. She will find it easier to decline working families where the order of things bears too heavily upon her than to attempt any change. I have been obliged to do this in 1 or 2 instances. And we're going to stop there. This is a long discussion between these 2 women. So we will maybe conclude it in the next video. But I don't like to make you sit too long with this, but it is a video, so you can stop at any time, or you can go on to the next one when it's ready, if you want to listen longer, right? All right, you guys, I hope you have a wonderful day, and I will see you next time. Bye. Oops, bye.